right, so picking up where we left off, you are wanting to know what is my view on late work. Well, it looks a little bit different for you guys than it did for my middle schoolers, partially because there were school requirements that I had to follow in terms of late work. So the school that I worked at was you could submit late work up to the end of the quarter in which it was assigned. So that's what I had to work within. Now, my philosophy was, if I'm assigning work, it's for a good purpose, and there is value in that learning activity. Therefore, it is important for me for students to do that work and to complete that work. So, if a student was missing an assignment on the date it was due, I had a policy that was in place that they all knew, and I explicitly taught that routine, which was the gradual release of responsibility. That made it their responsibility. So they would fill out a slip of paper explaining what the assignment was, why it was late or missing, and then they had to basically either choose from several different options or come up with their own options of what they were going to do to make up that assignment. It could be things like accept late points. It could be things like come in late or give up their lunchtime to come eat with me and complete the assignment. It could also be things like doing an alternative assignment or assessment. So students had options and freedom to choose between what they wanted the consequences to be. And that was just part of me as an educator wanting to give the choice and the power and the control over to the students as much as possible. I also was very explicit with late work that I had the option to change the assessment that I was going to give them as well. So, for example, if it were in a math class, not that I ever taught math, maybe I could change the format of the test or the questions on the test if it were a test that they were going to have to redo or a quiz they were wanting to redo. So that kind of overlaps with wanting to do reassessments and also with late work. Those two policies for me went hand in hand. So, as much as possible, giving the freedom and the responsibility and the consequences over to the students. If there was ever any kind of communication with home, that needed to be initiated by the student. And that was just, again, my teaching philosophy, that they needed to take responsibility for their own learning. So if they needed to call home to let their parents or guardians know what the consequences were, then they were the ones dialing the phone and having that conversation, and I was maybe standing next to them or nearby, so if the parent wanted to talk to me, they could. But ultimately, that was up to the student to communicate. Oh my goodness, something I'm seeing in several of your guys' classrooms that has become more pronounced in the previous 5 years, more so than ever before, is standardized everything. The curriculum you get is scripted, the assessments you get cannot be changed, things have to happen on the same day no matter where you are across the district. It's just a very standardized everything. So one of the questions that came out was, what do you do when everything is standardized and you're not allowed to deviate from it? So for example, you have different assessments or assignments or learning goals that you want to add into the curriculum, but you're not allowed to attach grades to them. Well, grades really ultimately at the end of the day are extrinsic motivators for most students. It's that carrot and stick of behaviorism. What we could do as educators is move to more of a classroom culture where it has intrinsic motivation, meaning you're setting up purposeful assignments and assessments that are engaging to students so they have more of a desire and they see the purpose for completing them. That way, even if there's not a grade attached to whatever it is you're presenting them with, they still have the desire to do it. So ways that you can build that intrinsic motivation, first of all, I think is data tracking. I worked with a group of students for remedial reading help, and there was no grade associated with the interventions I was giving them. It wasn't even associated with the class. So ways that I build intrinsic motivation and buy-in from them is we kept data tracking. So across all of their classes, we tracked how they were doing on different assignments and assessments so they could see their grades improve steadily. That way they could see the ways that what we were doing within that class impacted what they were doing in all of their classes. So they were more engaged and excited because they saw their grades going up. They saw that the more effort they put in, the more extrinsic motivations they were getting out of it in other places. Also, building up that culture within your classroom so there's peer supports, where peers are helping each other figure out what they're doing wrong, how they can do better, and encouraging them to work harder. So things like collaborative and group work, where they're held accountable to each other with what they've accomplished and what they've done. So, for example, if I were not going to have homework be worth credit, but when they came in the next day, they knew that they would be in a group of 4 students and they'd have to share those results, and all the other students in that group were going to have the work done, well, there's a little bit of an element of embarrassment there because they want to please their peers as well. So having that opportunity for peer evaluation, peer assessment, and peer accountability can help just as much as if you were assigning something for a grade. So those are ways you can kind of get around the standardization, but again, that's something that we increasingly more and more in the education system have to work within. All right, here's the big one. What happens when you and your CMT simply don't agree? You have different policies about how you create assessments, how you evaluate them, and how you give students feedback. What do? It's really a catch-22 because even though it is going to be your classroom next semester, it's still always going to be their classroom. So in many ways, student teaching is the most difficult teaching experience you're ever going to have because you truly are sharing this space with someone else and it's not entirely your own. So with that in mind, let's look at the positives. Let's look at the silver lining. That means you also have a lot of protection and a lot of buffer because you have a lot of support systems in place to support you. First, let's talk about your university supervisor. If you've not met him or her yet, I strongly suggest you look on LiveText, find out who that is, and start emailing with them. I have met pretty much all the university supervisors on campus, and I think they've all been in fairly regular contact if haven't come to your classroom to observe you already. So they are going to be your biggest advocate because they have the power to be the mediator between you and your CMT. I know I'm the university supervisor for a couple of students, and so I'm asking them, what are the difficult conversations you want me to have with your CMT so you don't have to? So I'm talking to CMTs about, all right, you really need to give them some opportunities to evaluate student work and to teach in small groups and to shadow teach with you. They're going to be taking over your classroom next semester, so I'm going to gently encourage you to do this because it's in your contract. I can have those conversations that you guys can't. So really get your university supervisor on board early so they are able to advocate for you. A lot of great phrases that you can take and you can approach these conversations with is this idea of, well, I know you're telling me that collaborative or group work won't work, or I know that you don't think your students can handle a Socratic seminar, but this is the only time I have where I can try something and it fail and it be okay because I have people like you there to support me. So you're kind of giving them this approach of, I know you're saying this isn't going to work, but can you please let me try it so I can see it for myself? And hopefully they'll give you a little bit of flexibility with that as well. So approaching it as, I hear you saying it won't work, please let me find that out for myself because this is the only time I get to try it out. And hopefully they'll be able to be a little bit more flexible with you as well and give you that power. And finally, a great one is to pass the buck. Your university supervisors, your professors, DESE, whoever it is, go ahead and pass the buck. That's what we're here for. Tell them, well, my professor is making me do this. This is for a grade. This is required. This is something I have to do to graduate and get certified. And tell them that. So it's not you that they're mad at, but they can be mad at me or your other professors or at DESE. We're fine with that. We'll take that. In fact, I also encourage you, if they are really fighting you on a method or something that you would like to do, then by all means, give them my contact information or one of your other professors' contact information, your methods person, so we can have that conversation as well. That's nothing new to any of us. We've all had those conversations with CMTs before, encouraging them to let you try new things, or sticking up for you and saying, yep, that is required, even if it's maybe something that's not, you just want to try it. So we will have your back on that as well. So those are a couple strategies I can think of. I'm sure there are a lot more, and that's why I strongly encourage you guys to be talking to each other and really taking the opportunity to really think about these questions in a group context during your methods classes and during your middle school classes. All right, my friends, I hope that answers everything. Keep the questions coming, and I'll keep answering them as best as I can. Have a good one.